Well, I'd followed it for the last couple of years. I followed it when it happened and when it was in the newspapers, and I've read about it on several occasions. And then I was asked at a function out in Culver City a couple of years ago if I would introduce these fellas to the audience. And so I introduced them, and then afterwards we were talking about they were saying that they were writing a book, and I said, great. And he said, well, maybe we'll send it to you someday, and you'd be interested in it. And I said, sure, send it to me. And so eventually they sent it a couple of years later, they sent it to me. And so that just, one thing led to another. Well, I've done it a little bit, but not to the extent that it was in this. I had some non-actors in Gran Torino, some of the smaller parts, and a couple of the large ones, actually. So I had kind of a technique of doing this, but at least I thought it was a good technique. But anyway, these guys, after hanging out with them and listening to the story over and over and questioning them as to why and how they did all this, I just finally one day said, I wonder if they should just play it themselves. And so I just asked them if they were interested, and they were in shock at first. And they said, does that mean we should get acting lessons? I said, no, you just want yourself. Yeah, it's not that challenging. I've done it in trains before, in antique trains, like in Unforgiven. At the beginning, I had an antique train, an older train, but those a little more roomy, the older trains. These trains now are very slim and fast, and so they don't give you a lot of room inside. But we have a really good crew, and they are not afraid to get in there and do the impossible. Well, there probably is a lot of those like that, and John Ford or anybody else's movies. When you see a good film, it's always fun, good stories, but you just. I never think of doing it myself. I just think of appreciating them doing it. But or sometimes you ask, how would I have told that story in that same way, and not necessarily. Sure, and you always ask yourself, what would you do? Somebody asks you, what would you do? I wouldn't know what it would do. And they didn't either. They just did it. They did it and asked questions afterwards.
No sé, tío. ¿Nunca tienes la sensación de que la vida te empuja hacia algo? ¿Hacia un propósito mayor?